Assalamualaikum to everybody. Today we're gonna learn kind of history and English to get mixed up together. Let's get started. What do you, let's, why do you think history and English is important to you? Why do you think? Let me know in the below comment section. That's today's question. Why you think and why it's important to you? Let's get started.
You've really got to relax. Dear Rita and Moby, how did England set up its first colony in America? From Mr. Keeber's class. Well, it was kind of a trial and error thing. Emphasis on the error part. First, the English got off to a late start with the whole colonizing thing. They watched as Spain and Portugal quickly snapped up land in the Americas during the 1500s and made a fortune on gold, silver, and sugar. England's longtime enemy, the French, were starting to explore in the north. Unlike its rivals, the English monarchy wasn't all-powerful. Its kings and queens shared control of the country with an elected parliament. So they couldn't just order an expensive mission to set up colonies. Instead, they outsourced the job to private adventurers. One was Sir Walter Raleigh, who claimed land on America's east coast, some of the only territory in the Americas that no European power had claimed yet. He called it Virginia, after a common nickname for his boss, Queen Elizabeth I. 2 English settlements were founded on the coast. Though neither lasted long, the Queen now had a claim in the so-called New World. Little did she know or care, that exact spot already had a king. Virginia had been home to dozens of tribes and nations for thousands of years. Those who lived in the coastal region all spoke Algonquian. They called their land Senecomica, which means densely inhabited place. The thick forests were a tough environment to survive in, much less create a civilization. Rival nations were in constant competition for land and other resources. In these conditions, it made sense for tribes to band together for strength. On the coast, a few of them had united to form a chiefdom. Each tribe had its own chief, but one was supreme above the rest. In the late 16th century, this paramount chief was Wahan Seneca. He was from the village of Powhatan, and he adopted that name as his title. Wahan Seneca was a shrewd leader. He brought more than 20 new tribes into the Powhatan Confederacy, sometimes through negotiation and sometimes by force. So when he heard reports of a strange people settling on his territory, it's safe to say he took it seriously. Yup, it was 1607, and England was giving colonization another try. This time, they outsourced the job to a corporation. The Virginia Company of London was a joint stock company. Anyone could buy a share, a tiny piece of the company. When enough shares were sold, there'd be a huge pool of cash to fund the colony. King James I gave the company a charter, the right to set up the colony and run it. The company would recruit men, supply them, and ship them overseas. Each recruit would get his own piece of land, after 7 years of work. In the meantime, the company assured them they'd have an easy gig, gathering all the gold lying around Virginia. As for food and shelter, the native people of Virginia would provide. They'd welcome the English as saviors for introducing them to Christianity. About 100 men signed on and set off for Jamestown, named after the king. No. Things did not go as planned. For starters, the men picked a terrible spot to settle. A filthy swamp filled with mosquitoes carrying malaria. They quickly set to work building homes and a protective wall, and planting crops. But supplies ran low, and the men spent most of their time looking for gold instead of food. Of course, they never did find any gold. Within a few months, the majority died from disease or starvation. Fortunately for them, they had Captain John Smith. He led missions to explore the area, trading with Powhatan villages along the way. Most were eager to exchange food for the settlers' guns and metal tools. Wahun Seneca allowed these exchanges to happen,
even though he knew the settlers sometimes stole from Powhatan villages. He figured the English could be a valuable ally against the rival nations that surrounded his confederacy. On one mission, Smith was captured and brought back to Wahun Seneca. The two forged a shaky alliance, aided by the chief's young daughter Matoaka, nicknamed Pocahontas.
She learned English from Smith and taught him Algonquian, and she tagged along with adults on trade missions to Jamestown. Her presence was like a signal that a trading party had come in peace.
But it wasn't long before relations between the two groups broke down. Find out why in Jamestown, Part 2.
We'll do part 2 right now. Let's get started.
And we're back. The man of the hour was Captain John Smith, who'd established trade relations with the Powhatan. Smith's talent as a leader got him elected president of the governing council. He immediately laid down the law. He that will not work shall not eat. So after a year of scraping by, the settlers finally focused all their effort on farming, which it's kind of hard to believe took them that long. But luck was against them. The area was having its worst drought in memory. Their crops failed just as hundreds of new settlers were arriving. The English began demanding food from their neighbors, sometimes violently. Wahun Seneca had had enough. His warriors surrounded Jamestown's walls, trapping everyone inside. The settlers called that winter the starving time. They ate snakes, rats, horses, leather, sometimes even their own dead. For the second time in 2 years, the colony lost most of its people to disease and hunger. Nope, Smith escaped that particular episode. He'd been seriously injured in a gunpowder explosion and had to ship back to England. He never returned. The Virginia Company kept Jamestown limping along. Every now and then, they would send more people and supplies. New settlements were established on better land, but still no gold was found, and the company was close to going broke. Meanwhile, hostilities between the settlers and the Powhatan continued. The English burned down villages, slaughtered families, and seized land. The Powhatan responded in kind, with raids on the settlers. The English dealt a major blow when they kidnapped Pocahontas in 1613. After a year of imprisonment, she married a settler named John Rolfe. It's likely she was trying to help bring an end to the war. And that's just what happened. A peace was agreed upon later that year. And a few years later, the settlers finally did strike gold, in a sense. John Rolfe had begun growing tobacco. Turns out, Virginia's warm climate was ideal for it. Soon, they were exporting huge amounts back to Europe. The colony quickly shifted from survival mode to developing a society. Women were recruited to sail to Virginia and start families. A local legislature, the House of Burgesses, was formed. It was based on England's Parliament, with representatives elected by landowners. Their first order of business? Setting a price for tobacco. Less than a month later, the first shipment of enslaved Africans arrived in Jamestown. Tobacco planters quickly saw the potential of an unpaid workforce. Over time, big plantations came to rely entirely on slave labor. Right, demanding food from their neighbors. sometimes violently. Wahan Seneca had had enough. His warriors surrounded Jamestown's walls, trapping everyone inside. The settlers called that winter the starving time. They ate snakes, rats, horses, leather, sometimes even their own dead. For the second time in 2 years, the colony lost most of its people to disease and hunger. Nope, Smith escaped that particular episode. He'd been seriously injured in a gunpowder explosion and had to ship back to England. He never returned. The Virginia Company kept Jamestown limping along. Every now and then, they would send more people and supplies. New settlements were established on better land, but still no gold was found, and the company was close to going broke. Meanwhile, hostilities between the settlers and the Powhatan continued. The English burned down villages, slaughtered families, and seized land. The Powhatan responded in kind, with raids on the settlers. The English dealt a major blow when they kidnapped Pocahontas in 1613. After a year of imprisonment, she married a settler named John Rolfe. It's likely she was trying to help bring an end to the war. And that's just what happened. A peace was agreed upon later that year. And a few years later, the settlers finally did strike gold, in a sense. John Rolfe had begun growing tobacco. Turns out, Virginia's warm climate was ideal for it. Soon, they were exporting huge amounts back to Europe. The colony quickly shifted from survival mode to developing a society. Women were recruited to sail to Virginia and start families. A local legislature, the House of Burgesses, was formed. It was based on England's Parliament, with representatives elected by landowners. Their first order of business? Setting a price for tobacco. Less than a month later, the first shipment of enslaved Africans arrived in Jamestown. Tobacco planters quickly saw the potential of an unpaid workforce. Over time, big plantations came to rely entirely on slave labor. Right, the Virginia Company of London. They never did manage to turn a profit. They were so far in debt that even all that sweet tobacco cash couldn't save them. And then, disaster struck their colony in Virginia. Powhatan warriors launched a surprise attack on every English village. Hundreds were killed in what came to be known as the Indian Massacre of 1622. The Confederacy's new chief, Opechancanough, had planned the attack. He'd seen the results of trying to negotiate with the English, an endless stream of settlers taking over Powhatan land to start tobacco plantations. He decided that the only way to stop them was force. Of course, by then it was too late. England had a foothold in America, and it wasn't going to give up now. King James revoked the old charter and put Virginia under direct royal control. That was the end of the Virginia Company of London, and the start of a new war that the Powhatan could not win. The company may have failed, but Jamestown was ultimately a success for England.
For better and for worse, Jamestown's model was repeated across the colonies.
European settlers were drawn to the New World by the lure of owning land, maybe striking it rich like John Rolfe, and the promise of self-rule, as every American colony set up a legislature like the House of Burgesses. It was the American dream before there was an America. Move along, boys. This is my claim. You're welcome.
Company. The next thing gotta done is company. Let's get started.
Okay, but how do you expect to make money selling this stuff if you... Dear Tim and Moby, my parents are always talking about stocks. What are they? From Eldridge. Well, stock is the money that's raised by a corporation that sells shares of itself to the public. A person who owns stock is called a shareholder or investor. Oh, okay, let's back up. Incorporating or forming a corporation is one way to organize a business. Almost all the large businesses that you know are corporations. But small businesses can be corporations too. When you invest in a corporation, you buy shares of its stock. You trade your money for a piece of the company. So, owning a share means that you, as an investor, share in the money the company makes or loses and in the things it buys. If the company's doing well, making more money than it spends, investors' shares of the company become more valuable. If it's doing badly and the company doesn't make as much money as it spends, the investor's shares become less valuable. As a shareholder, you also own a percentage of the company's assets, things that it buys, like factories and computers and even other companies. Well, that's the funny thing about the stock market. That's the place where you buy and sell shares of different companies. The price of a stock is ultimately determined by what investors are willing to pay for shares of each company. And what the investors will pay depends on how much money they think the company will make in the future. Well, it takes a lot of research and knowledge to predict when a company will grow. When people make big money in the stock market, it's often because they buy shares in a company and the shares don't cost much. This is usually when the company is new or not making much money. If that company grows or makes some more money, the same share that was worth pennies becomes worth a lot more. Right, buy low, sell high. You take a risk by investing in a company. It might pay off in the end, and it might not. Well, some investments are definitely less risky than others. A high-risk investment, like an internet startup, has the potential for making you a lot of money, or losing you a lot of money. Buying stock in a company that's been around a long time is a safer investment. The downside is that the established company has already grown, so you probably won't see a major change in your investment. Will I invest in your lemonade business? Well, it doesn't seem like you've actually sold any, so I'm going to go ahead and say no. Well, never mind profit. Just to break even, you have to sell that last glass for like $10.
The next thing we're gonna learn is mental health. Let's get started. The next thing we're gonna learn is money. Let's get started.
Dear Tim and Moby, what does it mean to round a number? I'm curious. Thank you, Jeanette. When you round a number, you change it to a simpler one with roughly the same value. It's basically an estimate. No, you can't just choose any old number you want. There are some rules you have to follow. When you round something, first you have to decide what place value you want to round to. A digit's place value is its position within a longer number. For integers, or whole numbers, the lowest place value is the ones place, followed by the tens place, hundreds, thousands, and right on up. Take these marbles. The package says each bag contains 17 of them. But say we wanted to round that number to the nearest 10. 17 is only 3 marbles away from 20, but it's 7 away from 10. So 17 rounded to the nearest 10 is 20. Let's try 14 marbles. 14 is closer to 10 than 20, so we round it down to 10. Right, if a number ends in 1 through 4, you round it down. If it ends in 5 through 9, round it up. This video game says it has 345 levels. To round to the nearest 10, look at the digit to the right of a tens place. It's 5, which means you round up. So far, so good. But what if you want to round it to the nearest 100? Same idea, but you're going to look at the digit to the right of the hundredths place instead. It's a 4, so we round down. 345 rounded to the nearest 100 is 300. And you can do that for any number, no matter how big. Just look at the digit to the right of the place value you're rounding to. Yeah, it's the same for decimals, only you don't put a 0 on the end. Like, say you want to round 3.45 to the nearest tenth. You look at the digit to the right and round based on that. In this case, it's 5, so we round to 3.5, or 3 and 5/10. But because it's a decimal, we don't need to write the 0 on the end. Well, rounding's useful in a lot of real-life situations. Like now. I only have $50 with me, but this kite costs $15.33, the candy bar costs 99 cents, the marbles cost $3.75, and the video game costs $29.99. I could add up all those numbers, but I don't have a calculator, and it's kind of inconvenient to pull out a pencil and paper and write it all down in the middle of a store. So I'll round the numbers. It's a lot easier to add 15, 1, 4, and 30. That makes $50. Although, that's a little too close for comfort. Let's see what the exact price is. Rats. See, that's why it's always good to round up when you're working with money. Double rats. $5. Ow, what'd you do that for? I do so know the value of $1.
Let's get started. It's my turn, young lady.
It's taking them so long to count the votes. People on Roblox have actually started a rally for president. Not for a president, but for them to become president. I'm voting for this guy. Look, this is gonna be a very
I'm around
political
50
video.
and then 60 turns.
Political at all.
Gee, you're gonna fall. Okay, I don't know that.
It's like literally by start posting, we will already be dated and we'll probably already know who the president is gonna be. But I'm recording this on the 6th.
I'm not gonna let them rest.
Oh god. Alright, on my alt account now, I'm safe. Yeah, we did it like this like 2 or 3 days.
Dad, I'm not letting them rest. Hurry up. You're taking them away from me. go forward. 한잔 걷어내야 돼. No, one on top. Finally, my turn. So you can just bend it. Bam, coming. It's resin. Dad, where you at? They're all in our base. Come on, Side, we got this. Side, I'm distracting them. Go, 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 go. Oh shit, they killed me right away. I killed them all. I killed them all, Side.
The next game we're gonna play is Dr. Foxing Show. Let's get started. Oh shit, help us! Help us! I got the drop on this nigga. Finish, finish! Don't worry, I'm gonna kill him.
At Holy Family Catholic High School, students find their fire through dynamic and diverse experiences
Oh!
in academics, activities,
I got
and
one
Christian
side. I boomboed one.
Look.
I know.
Handset. Handset.
Oh, sorry. Don't worry, I killed a lot.
You're supposed to have some written.
And salaam to everybody. Today we're making a new video
Call.
called
Guys, don't let them heal.
Hard Parking.
Let's
Get started.
with my middle
Brother.
and older.
Older.
What?
Now the next game we're going to play is Fortnite.
Let's get
Started.
with my middle
Brother.
and
Older.
or his name is and my name is
Empty.
So-
I'm coming for you, guys.
Ma and
Mohammed.
let's get
Started.
with my middle.
Guys, he's in the base.
It's an update. It's an update.
Today our older brother Madan, he buy the
Oh shit,
helmet
I'm 3 HP.
for me only.
I'm 3 HP down.
Let's take a couple minutes.
Dad, finish this guy right there. Finish my nigga. Help, help. Dad, I don't have the shit. I'm 6 HP, Dad. Help me. Help me.
Back up.
Dad, you're rushing. Oh, fuck, I'm down. No. One I haven't. Yeah? One I haven't. Oh, wait, I have to get something. I'm getting something.
You did?
Right there, Dad. All 3 of them. Dad, one is 20 HP. Dad, I'm getting them. I got them all. Right here, directions. Right here. Yes. Now get me.
shaydaanka marka masaakiinka ay ka marka keenayay sumcad baa duray inta keentay inta ka maqan oo duu ka duwi lahaa sidii halka uu wato wixii aan loo keenay baa calaati soo tabaga oo loo keenay dadkii soo wato ilaahay diin asxaabi oo wala u soo macaan ku isku kan wada saaray yahay shuu wax sama ay salax dadna sidoo kale mustaqbalka ku qoranada inta soo baxda ilaa faraqaasi oo loo yaaray oo ay tahay
Fortnite is ready. Hunter, you're not playing with me or what? Jeez. Just come. I see a person that come. Do for me. I see a person that go for there. Come.
My God!
Stop right there. I'll be right back. Come back. So far, I got an impression that Time to out the car. Let's go. Should I join you guys? Hamza, I found a nappy. Hamza, I found a nappy. A lamb. I found a lamb. Look.
What do you say I did?
I found a lamb.
It's not a lamb.
Okay, what is it then?
It is.
This. I want the color too. I found a person. That time is tricky, that doesn't count.